Okay, welcome back, everybody. And tonight we're going to talk about a couple of things. First, I want to apologize for the confusion about the website, and apparently it's all my fault, actually. So all of those nasty things I was saying about the technical people, just forget about them. I've been posting all these questions like for weeks, and nobody's been answering them, although people have been responding to the first question I posted. And the reason is, and I put up all these documents too, which apparently no one could see. I didn't realize that I put them on a section of the website which apparently I was the only person who could see. And so I figured out, it was explained to me, I don't want to say I figured this out, how to unlock this. So now all of you can go to the website, look at all these documents, respond to all of these questions that I've been posting, and have a good time, and also respond to each other, as some of you have been doing on that initial piece of it. And I've had a couple of students who've asked really good questions, and they preface this by saying, I know nothing about American history. So I've put a place where you can ask questions, too. Some people are timid about approaching me. Maybe it's just because they fear I am going to give them a 2-hour lecture when they ask something like, what color was Jefferson's hair? And so there are places you can ask questions and then have other people in the class respond to them, and I can also respond to them, and so on. So that should make our lives a lot more interesting, fun, and easy. So I apologize for my own failure to grasp that initially. And I thought there was something. Oh, yes, our first papers are due next week, and I'll say just a little bit about them. Any of these questions I have posted on the website you can write about as part of your paper. You also could look ahead to any of the cases we will talk about this semester and read one and comment on it, right in response to it. That is, I'm not assigning a paper topic, and it's not just because I am indecisive, but because I hope you'll be able to find something on your own, raise a question and answer it in the course of the paper. Try to stay away from contemporary issues. A number of people have asked, can I tie this in with contemporary debates? Well, that's probably not a good idea, because I'm not that interested. I mean, I'm sure like any of you I have opinions, and they may be different from yours, and it might color the way I read your paper if it turns out, you're not a flat earth person the way I am. And I may think, boy, what you were saying about Federalist 10 was great, but then you attacked whomever my particular political favorite happens to be. So stay away from contemporary things, which are implicit in much of what we do, but don't use this as an opportunity to vent about whatever it is you want to vent about. Okay, so yeah, keep focused on this period, try to understand this period on its own terms without looking to the past as a way of bashing whomever your political opponents happen to be at the moment. Also, someone asked a good question about citations, and it was actually a fairly simple question. When you're citing the Constitution, do you need to footnote it? And the answer is yes and no. The Constitution is similar to the Bible, not in the sense that they're both sacred texts, but each one there are lots of different editions of it. So, for example, I carry around this one, and it wouldn't make any sense for me to cite the page in this, but the Constitution has articles and sections. So when you are citing the Constitution, it would be Article 1, Section 8, Clause whatever, okay? That's how you cite it, and you can have a footnote saying Article 1, Section 8, Clause whatever. You don't need to give a page number or anything like that, because your reader has his own or her own copy of the Constitution. They can then go look it up rather than trying to hunt up that particular edition. Similar to the Bible, if any of you are going to be citing the Bible, it would be, that's where the phrase chapter and verse comes from, right? The book of Luke and chapter so-and-so, verse so-and-so. Okay. Any other questions on citations now that, yes?
Would you prefer MLA style?
No, I hate MLA style. Don't use MLA style. I go into a cold sweat, and just the mere mention of it. For some reason, well, no, I won't start venting. I warned you about venting. All this poor guy does is mention MLA, and you see what happens. No. Use footnotes or endnotes You know, if you really want to use MLA style, okay, but I hate it, so just bear that in mind. Footnotes or endnotes, for some reason, the folks in the MLA, which is the Modern Language Association, is anyone here in the modern? No one's going to admit now, a card-carrying member of the MLA, that for some reason they convinced us or convinced people in academia that it was distracting in the text. Instead, we'll have parentheses after every sentence with someone's name and a page number, and supposedly that's going to be easier. You know, put a little number, a footnote, and I use footnote, endnote interchangeably. I don't care if they're at the bottom of the page or at the end of the thing. But if you're using a direct quote from someone, you have to cite it. Okay? So a little footnote, and the citation, the way the citation goes is this. And this is true for just about anything. The name of the author, and it's always first names first in notes. Okay, and then if this is an article, that is something that is contained in something bigger, you put quotations around it. So, article title. Then, because I'm running out of room here, I'm going to go down here, but you could keep going across. The name of the book. And books are underlined or put in italics. There are three things that you will underline or put in italics when you're writing. One is the title of a book. Maybe there are four things. Yeah, there are four things. Two is the title of a newspaper or magazine. Those get underlined. Third, Supreme Court cases. The plaintiff and the defendant's names underlined. Fourth, anyone know? Names of ships. Okay? Italicize, underline that. Okay? And then the city where it was published, the publisher, and the date of publication, end of parentheses, and then the page number. Okay, and here's the good news. You do this in your first footnote, and footnote a few down refers to the same thing. All you need to do is author's last name, short title, and then the page. You presume the reader can remember all of this stuff, knows somewhere back there is all of this other stuff. I can go look it up if I really want to find the book. Okay, so that's an article within a book. We could get fancier. Something is edited, collection of Madison's writings edited by someone else. Madison's name comes first. He's the more important one. After the name of the book, you would put the editor. And, you know, so that's the way you would do it. Okay, yes?
What about internet sources?
What about internet sources? Very good point, because I suspect most of us will be using internet sources. You would have as much of the, if this is a book you get off the internet, then this stuff as much as you can. And then afterwards, you know, the internet address. Blah, 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 and whatever, okay? So that's it. So just make sure, the purpose of a footnote is so that the reader can find this in a reasonable way, okay? Something you don't need to footnote are things I say in class, because I always find it unnerving when someone says something really off the wall and then cites me, and I get really nervous about the kinds of things I must be saying up here. So don't take anything I say both, well, with a grain of salt and as a free gift. Do with it what you will. You don't need to cite me, because I am not the definitive source on all of this stuff, believe it or not.
This may be a dumb question. Is the Federalist Papers a whole book?
That's a very good question. Yeah.
I think a lot of us are going to be citing it.
Yes. The Federalist, yes, it is a whole book, but they're different essays, right? So you're not going to be citing the whole thing. You're going to be, so here, it would, think about it like this. Madison, Federalist 10, whatever edition you're using, etc. You don't need to give James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay. We know pretty much who wrote which ones, so you can cite that person as the author. There are a few that are Madison and Hamilton, we think. But, yeah, so it is a whole book, unless you're using one of the editions like the University of Wisconsin, or I'm sorry, the State Historical Society of Wisconsin has compiled a documentary history of the ratification of the Constitution that has the individual Federalist essays. In that case, you would cite that essay. Cite whatever edition you use. Don't try to fool me by citing the 1788 edition of the Federalist, although, some of you may have gone to read it. But whatever edition you use, and believe it or not, some pretty famous historians have gotten into trouble by poor citation, and so I don't want that to happen to you. Okay, so yeah, there are individual essays. There are some collections that have excerpts and so on. Cite what you use. Don't try to pass it off as you've done all this primary research. You found Alexander Hamilton's draft of it somewhere, which may exist. But any other questions? Okay. And again, you'll turn your papers in and we'll read them and we'll tell you if you've done something wrong. So don't worry too much. Don't turn it in, because, by the way, is anyone here a lawyer? Because lawyers have their own way of citation. And just remember, wherever you're citing, use whatever the local ethic is as far as citations go. And don't, when you wind up in teaching English somewhere or getting to the MLA convention, don't insist on using footnotes in your papers because I insisted on it. Okay. Any other questions? I'm sorry to have jumped on you with that. Okay. Second, while we're on this subject, actually it's a different subject. Next Thursday, that is October 1st, at the Massachusetts Historical Society, which is at 1154 Boylston Street, at 5:15, Pauline Maier will be talking about her new book on the ratification of the Constitution. This is a huge project she's been working on. She's one of the foremost historians of the founding, and this is probably the best book that will ever be written about the ratification process. So that's October. I don't know if the book's out yet, so this is one of the preview talks she's been giving. October 1st, 5:15. This is kind of an informal gathering at the Mass Historical Society. I posted the notice on the course website, hopefully in a place that more people than me can see. You might want to alert them you're coming, but you can go there, listen, and afterwards they usually have sandwiches, and you can talk to all of the historians. So that should be interesting. Next week I will be talking about the ratification of the Constitution, and you can go hear Pauline Maier and see what I got wrong. Okay? So, any other questions? Okay. Then I thought last time we began, I was going to tell you about James Madison's Vices of the Political System, and we ran out of time. And I did post this on the website, but apparently no. Has anyone read this, by the way, Vices of the Political System? It's an extraordinary document. Madison, in the time between the Annapolis Convention or Conference of 1786 and the Philadelphia Convention of 1787, Madison, in April of 1787, wrote this memorandum, a note to himself, called Vices of the Political System of the United States. And Madison has 12 vices, things that are wrong. A very interesting document, and for those of us who have been paying attention to what's happening in the 1780s, some of them are fairly straightforward. First is the failure of the states to comply with constitutional requisitions. Yeah, this is a big problem. Congress has requisitioned $14 million from the states. The states have contributed about $2 million. The states don't do what the Congress says they should, and this is a bad thing, according to Madison. Second is encroachments by the states on federal authority. States doing things that should be federal responsibilities. unlicensed compacts between Virginia and Maryland, and between Pennsylvania and New Jersey, Massachusetts keeping troops. Again, Shays' Rebellion, Massachusetts raises troops. Georgia making treaties with the Indians, making wars with the Indians. All of these are things the federal government should be doing, but is incompetent to act. Therefore, the states are doing them, and Madison sees this as a bad thing. The states violate the law of nations and treaties. The Treaty of 1783 with Great Britain said that the states are going to compensate people whose property they had seized, the Loyalists. You can imagine how popular a proposition that is going to be in the states, taxing people who are already overtaxed in order to pay the Loyalists, the people who lost the war. And consequently, the states don't do it. And these folks want compensation for the property that the treaty says was illegally taken. And we had agreed to that in the treaty, right? And the states don't do it. And because the states won't tax their citizens to pay off the Loyalists, the British government says we don't have to hold up our end of the treaty, which said we were going to clear out of the Ohio River Valley and not maintain our forts there and not arm the native people there so they can kill you. Now, this isn't an abstract question. It's something that has a direct consequence, that you're not taxing people to pay us. We're going to have the Indians kill you. States trespass on the rights of each other. This is number 4 for those of you keeping track. Maryland taxes vessels coming into Chesapeake Bay in conflict with what Virginia wants. Virginia says anyone coming into Chesapeake Bay has to stop at our ports first, trespassing on the rights of each other. Paper money, installment of debts, closing courts, making property a legal tender. These are aggressions, Madison says, on the rights of other states. As the citizens of every state stand and are either creditors or debtors, this is going to hurt one or benefit one or the other. So, big problem here. Number 5 is want of concert in matters where common interest requires it. You can't get the states to cooperate with one another. That's a big problem. So far, things have been peaceful. No one has attacked us, unless you count Algiers, which has been capturing American ships. But the states will not cooperate with one another. No guarantee to the states of their constitutions and laws against internal violence. Quite clearly, you can see here, Shays' Rebellion, there is no way to protect the state of Massachusetts from internal violence. But Madison is actually thinking more broadly about this problem. And he's actually thinking here about a bigger problem. And that is this problem we'll keep talking about, the problem of majority and minority, and the rights and powers of each. According to fact and experience, a minority may, in an appeal to force, be an overmatch for the majority. Quite an alarming thing. According to Republican theory, both right and power are vested in the majority and are held to be synonymous. We operate with majority rule. What the majority decides is what we all agree to. However, this isn't always the case. What if the minority possess some power? Suppose they include all who have skills and habits of military life. That could be a threatening thing in any system, a system where the majority is supposed to govern. Well, what if the minority are the ones who are armed? Or if they have great pecuniary resources, that is, they have a lot of money. And in this case, 1/3 may conquer 2/3. So that's one example of this. 1/3 of those who participate in the choice of rulers may be rendered a majority by the accession of those whose poverty excludes them from a right of suffrage. Okay, so all of the states have some form of property qualification. So there may be folks who are excluded from voting, but a minority may appeal to their interest and get them to side with them in overthrowing the majority of the property holders who think everything is fine because we can outvote this minority. Okay? And who, for obvious reasons, these folks without property will be more likely to join the standard of sedition than that of established government. Imagine that. Poor folks are going to be more likely to join the standard of sedition than that of the established government. You could probably see that one coming, right? Okay. Third, where slavery exists, the Republican theory becomes still more fallacious. You know, Madison could look out the window and see that most of the people on his plantation were not free and voting citizens. They were held in subjection by, in his case, a minority. So how can you maintain a Republican system under this? This is a big problem. The whole problem of slavery here in protecting what Madison knew was Republican rule, the rule of the majority. He doesn't expand on this, the relationship of slavery to Republican theory, although throughout his life it's a troubling thing. 7 is want of sanction to the laws and of coercion in the government of the Confederacy. You know, the Congress makes all these laws, but they can't do anything to enforce the laws. There is no sanction on the part of Congress. You know, they pass edicts, but what happens if no one listens to them? Well, nothing, because Congress can't do anything. And this means anything Congress does is going to be, a failure, because Congress really cannot do anything. So this is, these are the problems, and you can imagine possible solutions to this. You know, disarm the minority, make the Congress stronger, but none of those things really would work because it's a problem in the system itself. And here Madison gets into what the problems in the system are. Want of ratification by the people of the Articles of Confederation. The people of the United States had never agreed to be governed under the Articles of Confederation. The state governments had. So the Congress cannot coerce anyone because no one had ever said, yes, let's make Congress the government. So that's a big problem here. That you couldn't really just say, okay, we're going to give Congress more power, and that's going to solve the problems. No, because the people had never ratified it. And then another problem comes up, multiplicity of laws in the several states. States have constant turnover in their legislatures. States have a variety of laws. It's almost impossible to know what the law is throughout the country because each state makes its own laws. Well, what are the solutions to that? Have some body that makes laws? That's really not going to work. You need, Madison is writing here. Madison actually, I should point out here, what you see laid out in Vices of the Political System in many ways underlie what becomes the Constitution. But Madison has a very particular end in mind as he is writing this. It comes into his mind as he's writing this, but it doesn't become part of the Constitution. This is kind of a problem. Well, I don't know if it's a problem for us. It's just a little puzzle. Madison comes out of this thinking the essential thing in the federal Constitution will have to be giving the federal government a veto power over state laws. And giving the House of Representatives and the Senate, the legislative body, giving them the power to veto state laws. Because he sees, as you could probably tell by the tenor of this, the real problem here is the state governments have too much power. Something needs to be done to check them, but it won't work just to have the Congress of the Confederation checking them because that Congress has no sanction from the people of the United States. The people of the United States have created their state governments. They have not created this federal government, so you can't just say, okay, now this Congress, the Continental Congress, will be able to veto state laws. That would be absurd. So this is a problem. Multiplicity of laws in the several states, the mutability of state laws. The laws keep changing. You know, in Rhode Island, a new legislature is elected every 6 months. And they change things. One reason you elect a new legislature is because you don't like what the last legislature did. This happens Used to happen all the time. It should happen more frequently. So what happens, you've been elected because the people didn't like what the last legislature did. You overturn whatever it was they did, which was objectionable, which means you don't have any surety in what the law is going to be. So this change in laws, and what's the solution to this? Say no one can ever change laws? Well, no. But you just you have to have something that can stabilize the system. And this is the real dilemma in a republican system. Under monarchies, the monarch operates outside the parliamentary bounds, but the monarch represents the interests of the whole nation. Okay? So he can be a check on the legislature. But how can you have in an elective system a check on the elected bodies? How can you have checks within a system where people are voting for everybody in the system? Won't the people they elect into the executive branch be as misguided as those they've sent into the legislative branch? And how do you do this? Very complicated thing, very difficult thing. I'm pretty sure none of us in the room could figure this out. I know I couldn't. I mean, you folks may be wiser than I am. And, I come to doubt that anyone since 1787 would have been able to figure this out. But Madison does. I kind of like the system they come up with. This is a subject about which we all can disagree, of course. Some of you may have signed up for the class because you can't wait to scrap this thing and start anew. But does anyone, by the way, think that? I don't know. Well, you saw how I reacted to the MLA. You don't want to say, I hate James Madison. No. Okay. Okay. So then number 11 is the injustice of the laws of the state. So we've gone through multiplicity of laws, mutability of laws, and some of you may think, well, what's the problem with having a lot of laws? If you were a lawyer, you might like that. Or the mutability of laws, we all like change, okay? But injustice, I suspect no one here likes injustice of laws, thinks that's a selling point for this system, having unjust laws. Okay. If the multiplicity of laws and mutability of laws prove a want of wisdom, their injustice betrays a defect still more alarming. More alarming, not merely because it is a greater evil in itself, because it brings more into question the fundamental principle of republican government, that the majority who rule in such governments are the safest guardians both of public good and of private rights. Okay, so that's a big problem. We think the majority are safe guardians of public good and private rights, but what happens when it's not? To what causes is this evil to be ascribed? And Madison says there are two potential causes for this. One, the cause is in the representative body. Okay? You've elected bad people. And that's what's going to make this Republican theory instead turn on either public good or private rights. Believe it or not, legislative bodies can betray the public good or they can attack private rights, even though we say in a Republican system it shouldn't happen. Secondly, the problem may be in the people themselves. Well, that's really alarming. What if the majority of the people are really bad? Anyone thought of that? Boy, if any of you are thinking of running for office, I think there's lots of material here you could use. Why is our system so bad? It's because of you folks. So vote for me. Okay. Now, representative appointments are sought from three motives. 1, ambition. 2, personal interest. 3, public good. Can anyone think of any others, by the way? Ambition, personal interest, public good, why people run for office. Has anyone here ever run for office, by the way? Anyone here aspire to run for office? Okay, good. So why are you aspiring to run for office?
I don't know, to affect the changes that are being made.
Okay, so we'll put you down for public good, affecting changes you want to be made. Okay, good.
Well, like the candidates, they just think they should just, there's a sense
Well, we don't need to name
The
names.
family did it, so you should continue. The sense of public duty.
Public duty, okay, but not, you wouldn't say that's personal interest or ambition.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm not denigrating anyone because, I think Madison understands human nature. He's not saying we have to do away with ambitious people or people who have personal interests. Because people do have personal interests, and ambition is something that makes people run for office. Yes?
Would you say that running for the interests of a particular minority group, would that be separate possibly from the consideration of public good?
I don't know. What do you think?
I would think so.
So that's not running for the public good, but instead running, I don't know, because here's something, Madison understood the political process in a way that we who have never run for office really don't. Because Madison was a politician. Okay? He had gone to Princeton, and he's not a lawyer. He's somewhat unique among the founders in never being a lawyer. In Princeton, he had studied theology. Okay? Comes home to Orange County, Virginia, and he is the wealthiest guy in the county. Well, his father is, James Madison Sr., but young James Madison is the best educated. In fact, he got a master's degree at Princeton. He stayed for an extra year, and during his time at Princeton, he studied so hard, he had a nervous breakdown. He forced himself to study, okay? And it led to a nervous collapse. He should be an example to all of us. Comes home to Virginia and believes, he should be sent to the House of Burgesses because he is the smartest guy in the county as well as the son of the wealthiest. Now, a young gentleman in Virginia in those days, like James Madison certainly was, is not going to run around the county slapping people on the back and saying, hey, vote for me, because that would be presumptuous. Instead, he allows his friends, who think he would be a great member of the House of Burgesses, to place his name before the public. And the public then will get to choose between young James Madison, smartest, wealthiest guy in Orange County, and whoever else may allow his name to be placed before the disinterested public. Okay? There was another guy in Orange County who did have his name placed before the public. He owned a tavern in Orange County, in Montpelier, which was the county seat. And everybody in those days would go to the county seat to vote. So on election day, you have, young James Madison's friends saying, I hope that you will consider James Madison, who has allowed his name to be placed before you for consideration. And you have the tavern keeper who gives out free whiskey to everybody who comes to vote. Who do you think wins? The tavern keeper. It's not even close, okay? So if you're young James Madison, I think I can think of one of two things you might do. The hell with these morons. Why would I want to dirty myself by engaging in what he will later call the vicious arts of politics? Or you can think, there's something I need to do differently. If I really think the public good requires me to serve in the House of Burgesses, I should figure out how to get elected. And he does the next time, okay? So he's elected to the House of Burgesses, and he believes what he's going to find are other high-minded men who have the public good at heart. What he finds are people who are there for ambition or self-interest, because this is a pretty good job. You get to do all kinds of things, decide where roads go, decide how much we're going to spend on things, and so on, things that can benefit you or your constituents, and you don't have discourses on the proper structure of government. Instead, it's a lot of grasping, self-interested politicians. And this is a learning experience for Madison. He's not a great speaker, but that's not a big issue because most work in legislative bodies happens in committee. And he finds out how the legislative process works, which is an education in and of itself. I mentioned last time that Jefferson wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. It's really Madison who gets it through the House of Burgesses in the mid-1780s. And Madison is one of the great legislators of all time. In the 1790s, not only is it Madison who gets through Congress the various bills setting up the executive branch, the Bill of Rights, he also becomes, so he is responsible for the legislative agenda of the Washington administration. He also becomes the chief critic of the legislative agenda of the Washington administration and becomes the Republican Party's leader in Congress. He creates the party system in the 1790s. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to start the sermon on James Madison quite so early. So stop the tape, we'll rewind, and we'll start over. Now, so Madison understands how the political system works. And what he has seen in his time in the Virginia Assembly is ambition, personal interest, and yes, there is some commitment to the public good. Unhappily, the two first are proved by experience to be the most prevalent. Hence, candidates who feel them, particularly the second, are most industrious. The hardest working guys are the ones who do have some personal interest, some personal stake in this. I think you can probably see this if you look around. I mean, who are the ones really out there hustling for votes? You know, not the ones who think the public good requires this, but those who think, I need this job, or I want to get elected to this so that I can, get ahead for whatever reason. And they're most successful in pursuing their object, forming often a majority in the legislative councils with interested views contrary to the interests and views of their constituents. They join in a perfidious sacrifice of the latter to the former. So these guys will sacrifice their constituents' interests to their own interests. Can you imagine that happening? I'm shocked. Boy, the 1780s must have been a terrible time. Okay. A succeeding election, it might be supposed, would displace the offenders and repair the mischief. But how easily are base and selfish measures, masked by pretexts of public good and apparent expediency? How frequently will a repetition of the same arts and industry, which succeeded in the first instance, again prevail on the unwary to misplace their confidence? These guys are really sharp. How frequently, too, will the honest but unenlightened representative be the dupe of a favorite leader, veiling his selfish views under the professions of public good? And no one ever runs for office saying, I want to do harm to the public. I want to do all kinds of outrageous things. Has anyone ever run into anyone like that? Boy, my stake in this is my own personal ambition, my own self-interest. No one ever says that. At least I've never run across anyone who has. It would be refreshing, but the person wouldn't be elected, so it would be too bad. So, veiling his selfish views under the professions of public good, varnishing his sophistical arguments with the glowing colors of popular eloquence. So this is a big problem in these representative bodies, right? I'll repeat that again. Varnishing his sophistical arguments with the glowing colors of popular eloquence. I once made a mistake. I was taking an oral exam, and I made the mistake of saying James Madison didn't have a great gift for rhetoric and style. And I'm wrong, okay? A still more fatal, if not more frequent cause lies among the people themselves. All civilized societies are divided into different interests and factions, as they happen to be creditors or debtors, rich or poor, husbandmen, merchants, or manufacturers, members of different religious sects, followers of different political leaders, inhabitants of different districts, owners of different kinds of property, etc., etc. Okay? All societies have these divisions. People disagree about things for a variety of reasons. In Republican government, the majority, however composed, ultimately give the law. Whenever, therefore, an apparent interest or common passion unites a majority, what is to restrain them from unjust violations of the rights and interests of the minority or of individuals? Has anyone thought of this? What if the majority gets together and decides they're going to, everyone who belongs to one church is going to do something? The farmers will get together or the merchants will get together and form a majority. There are only three motives that will prevent them from doing this. One, a prudent regard to their own good as involved in the general and permanent good of the community. Well, we don't want to do that because we're all part of one community and we don't want to hurt other people in the community. This consideration, though of a decisive weight in itself, is found by experience to be too often unheeded. Second, respect for character. However strong, we won't do that because it would Our character won't allow it. Okay. However strong this motive may be in individuals, it is insufficient to restrain them from injustice. Okay? In a multitude, its efficacy is diminished in proportion to the number which is to share in the praise or the blame. Besides, we don't need to get into all of this. Third, he talks about different things that different states have done which violate the rights of either minorities or of others. And third, will religion be the only remaining motive? Will the only remaining motive be a sufficient restraint? It is not pretended to be such on men individually considered. That is, religion doesn't restrain individuals too often. Will its effect be greater on them considered in an aggregate view? Quite the reverse. Okay. The conduct of every popular assembly acting on oath, the strongest of religious ties, proves that individuals join without remorse in acts against which their consciences would revolt if proposed to them under the like sanction separately in their closets. That is, a legislative body will get together and do all kinds of things that these guys wouldn't do individually. When indeed religion is kindled into enthusiasm, its force, like that of other passions, is increased by the sympathy of a multitude. So instead of being a restraint, people will get fired up by religious enthusiasm and trample on the rights of others. Besides, as religion in its coolest state is not infallible, it may become a motive to oppression as well as restraint from injustice. And here we get to the crux of it. Place 3 individuals in a situation where the interest of each depends on the voice of the others, and give to 2 of them an interest opposed to the rights of the third. Will the latter be secure? The prudence of every man would shun the danger. The rules and forms of justice oppose and guard against it. Will 2,000 in a like situation be less likely to encroach on the rights of 1,000? Well, no. The contrary is witnessed by the notorious factions and oppressions which take place in corporate towns, limited as the opportunities are, and in little republics where uncontrolled by apprehensions of external danger. So this is the big problem. You have these little states, and it's more likely here for a majority to form that will oppress the minority. And this actually, the whole Republican theory says you can only have a republic in a small area. And here Madison comes to this breathtaking conclusion. Actually, you cannot have a republic in a small area because it is contained and you are more likely to have a majority faction form. The only way to protect these 2 things that Madison thinks are important to any Republican society, public good, individual rights, is to extend the sphere of the republic, to encompass more interests, to make it less likely that a majority faction can form. Okay? If an enlargement of the sphere is found to lessen the insecurity of private rights, it is not because the impulse of a common interest or passion is less predominant in this case with the majority, but because a common interest or passion is less apt to be felt, and the requisite combinations less easy to be formed by a great than by a small number. The society becomes broken into a greater variety of interests, of pursuits, of passions, which check each other, while those who may feel a common sentiment have less opportunity of communication and concert. It may be inferred that the inconveniences of popular states, contrary to the prevailing theory, are in proportion not to the extent, but to the narrowness of their limits. So what you have to do in government is a modification of the sovereignty, as will render it sufficiently neutral between the different interests and factions to control one part of the society from invading the rights of another, and at the same time sufficiently controlled itself from setting up an interest adverse to that of the whole society. Okay? So you have to have some force here that can check these individual factions. It will be neutral among them, and it will be able to check the abuses of one faction over another, and at the same time, it itself will not become a force against the interests of these various, parties to the society. Okay? In absolute monarchies, the prince is sufficiently neutral toward his subjects, but frequently sacrifices their happiness to his ambition or avarice. In small republics, the sovereign will is sufficiently controlled from such a sacrifice of the entire society, but is not sufficiently neutral towards the parts composing it. As a limited monarchy tempers the evils of an absolute one, so an extensive republic ameliorates the administration of a small republic. So, very important thing here, that you have to extend this sphere to prevent these little factions from, make it more difficult for little factions to form, and at the same time you don't want this newly created extended sphere to become something that is going to trample on what's ever happening in these individual places. Any questions on this? Okay. So this is Madison's memo, and the ideas here really become the basis for what happens in the summer of 1787 in Philadelphia. As you probably know, well, as you'll find out, in the summer of 1787, the convention that had been proposed by the Annapolis meeting assembles in Philadelphia with the object of revising the Articles of Confederation. And what they do instead is scrap the Articles and start anew. And I think this would be a good time for us to take a break, and when we come back, I'll tell you what happens in the summer of 1787.